Are we doing? I like that bonus skeleton at the end. That was pretty funny.
That is a cool intro, dude. I love it.
Thank you. Welcome back to another episode of Comics Della Morte. I'm your host, Crimson Owl Comics, Ronnie Gunter, my co-host, Frogbreaker Studios, Jason Alexander, and a special guest, Joshua Kemble. How you doing, Josh?
Good.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. You guys might also have another guest, my pug, in the background. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. It's trying to get everyone, whoever wants to come on, just to talk about horror because horror's fun, man. You know, why not? And
for sure.
And tell a little bit of people about yourself.
Cool. Yeah. So I am a full-time art director. I've done professional graphic design and cartooning for over 15 years. And I also am a cartoonist. And I do my own graphic novels and comics and stuff. And I'm working on the second of this, but I finished this book about faith and mental illness called Two Stories, which is hand-lettered, hand-inked, and it's about 120 black and white pages. And I'm pretty proud of it. And that's available on Amazon. And then aside from that, just constantly cartooning and working on stuff. So that's
awesome.
That's my stuff.
Your book is so good, man. I have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it at least twice completely so far. So
nice. Cool. Twice.
It's really,
that's
really
awesome.
good. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a very honest book. I enjoy it. Gary, what's up, man?
We got Gary in the chats, you know.
Yeah.
And pretty much
Mr. Dinosaurs versus Mars Bots.
Yeah, that's a great book too.
Yeah, exactly. And Jason, you want to promote anything of yours before we get into the discussion?
Bundle 8 is actually live. I just got mine in the mail today. I'm gonna see if Aaron has yes. So we got Drifter. This is one of 6, guys. Like this story will see the end of the bundles. So it's kung fu, and it's really, really good. Like I'm excited to see Aaron's stamp on like the final artwork, and it looks so good in person. Liaison, number 2 or 3. This book, you find out more about the portal that was discussed in number 1. You find out about the character, the main character of the story, and it takes an interesting turn as you see it unfold. And Gilead City 2 or 3 is this cyber future cult story where now Xander, who's had to watch someone be incinerated for speaking out against the ruling elite of the story in issue 1, is now facing a tribunal for reasons unknown at this point. So it gets pretty interesting, and its final issue is coming up in the next bundle. So you get 3 books a month. You get original artwork. You get Aaron's artwork is so different to be delivered in. So I'm not even showing the daggum bundle, y'all. I do this every time. Like, this is like my comic shtick. I'll screen share it real quick. But y'all have heard me talk about them now, so let me screen share it. All right, here it is. These are our current books. So this is Drifter. This is the Kung Fu story. This is Liaison. This is the story I was saying about the portal opening. And this is Gilead City. I really enjoy all 3 of these books. So check them out. Minicomicbundles.com. I don't want to keep going on and on and on, but find me at Instagram, Fallbreaker Studios. I'm cooking up something a little different because I'm in the groove of writing something fresh now. So Follow Breaker Studios Instagram, minicomicbundles.com for what I'm doing now that exists. And that's me. Stay tuned for more, I guess.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
Those bundles are great too.
Thank you.
Yeah, they are.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
They really
it.
are.
Yeah, they're like a step above, like, sometimes people will hear like mini comics and not quite realize like what the gamut of mini
Right.
comics are. And it's like the
Mhm.
kind of mini comics you guys produce are just on a totally different level.
Thank
It's
you.
awesome.
Yeah. There's levels to them. Like this is like Drifter here. Like it's
So good.
it's a fully illustrated comic. It's just
Yeah.
1/8 the size. Like it's
Awesome.
very complex. I love it. So I'm very proud. I'm very proud of them. They're fun books. So it's wrapping up now. So you guys got to get them while you can. So minicomicbundles.com.
Awesome.
That's all I got to say about that.
And for anyone watching in the reruns, Jason's links and Josh's links are in the description. Go out and buy Josh's book. It is really good.
100%. Yo.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, I keep mine close by.
Yeah. And for me, go on Topis and read my second episode, The Prophecy, of my ongoing horror series that I release each month. It's just really fun to work on horror and just, get the great feedback of what people like of the story and how, it's suspenseful and all that stuff. So I just appreciate everyone for all the love and, the comments.
And Ronnie is letting it go in this episode. Like, it's hard coming out, y'all. It is coming out.
Yeah, that twist with the comet is I don't want to give much away, but that's so good.
Yeah,
it's been fun.
And with the parasites latching onto the brains, as you guys saw, just I wanted to channel that almost like that HP Lovecraft, like you're creating a universe of horror. It's just so fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so good.
Yeah, it's been a blast to read, Ronnie. It really has. So what are we talking about tonight, man?
My 100 subscriber, for all of you guys that didn't know, I hit 100 on YouTube. So that's great.
Hey, congratulations, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. And, it's so great because, with the YouTube here, I didn't really do anything. But once we started doing the horror show, that's when people started coming because, you have to find your niche. Not everyone's great at doing it, how to draw videos and stuff like that. But, if you could find a good topic to talk about, and if you could get a co-host like my buddy Jason here, it just, blows up instantly.
Yes. Chatty Patty himself.
Yeah.
It's such a great topic too. I mean, horror is so fun, like horror music, horror movies, like it's all super exciting and fun. So it's I think it's good to niche down and like find your audience, that's cool.
Yeah, and for me, for a while I was thinking about what topics should we talk to you about, and I was like, world building and horror, because your book is based off of your life. And you can't put like every single detail part in your life. So you had to sit down and focus on what part of my world is the most important to talk about. So, you kind of have an understanding of what world building is. So first off, why do you like horror so much?
So it's weird. I mean, like there's a part of horror that I like, and it kind of ties in with like first off, like just in music, like I love the Misfits and I love the Damned, and like they're both horror punk. So there's being a kid who kind of was really into punk rock, like there's a huge overlap between punk and horror, and so that's cool. I like good like subtle horror a lot. The feeling you get from it, the suspense, the feeling of like a really good tense movie where it's like that moment before where you're just like, ooh, like it's a great thing. And I love when it's masterfully woven, but I also really like really bad B movies. Like I have forever. And like the kind that
the 80s
aren't
were filled up with them.
Yeah, and they aren't like particularly love the ones that aren't even trying to be bad. Like they're like a good Ed Wood flick or something, where it's like it's like authentically trying to do something great and failing at it, but it's failing in such an epically beautiful way. And I think that's a part I really like about horror too, is like, I actually like kind of when it gets corny. And then of course I love like the Evil Dead kind of genre of horror too, where it's like cheesy intentionally, but then just on this great level. And the world building and the characters, even though it's over the top, it's just so like its own kind of vibe and feel. And again, it's like the feeling of Halloween, I think, is what I like about horror. It's fun to it's fun to put on a costume. It's fun to like to kind of experience like the thrill of being out and like a spooky night. Like I think that's all of like the stuff that I dig in horror, you know?
Yeah. It's fun to learn the rules of the world.
Yes.
Like in real time, like in whatever episode or whatever book or whatever you're watching. It's fun to like understand the rules, because at that point you're in it. Like that's where your reality is suspended. And so world building is, I did it, but I never really knew what it was called, because that's just, everything has a different word when you learn it. But world building is important, because you have to set up the rules, because that's where you get people pulled in.
Yeah, and if you break those rules that you kind of established, you can pull people out. You can lose people from a story, right. So it's so important to kind of establish like these are the ground rules.
Yep.
And then if you're going to break the rules, like do it very intentionally and methodically. So it, that can also create like suspense and horror, right? Where you have the big twist where it's like, wait, that's against the rules.
Right.
Sure. But I absolutely love that about world building too, where it's like you can kind of get people to like, you can get readers to kind of get invested in a story by setting up a world and kind of presenting a universe. And like Jason was saying, like, presenting like the rules, the ground rules for that, whatever world this is going to be. And the fun thing is, like, if it's done well enough and confidently enough, we kind of accept it. Like, I was bringing up like Evil Dead, but it's like, that's one of the things I love about Evil Dead is it just kind of establishes these crazy rules very early on with like the Necronomicon and stuff. And it's like, it's pretty early into the story. And then you just kind of go with it. Like
it's yours. Into it. They're yours. Yeah.
And I feel like I love that. I love that, especially when it doesn't become like the midichlorian type thing, right? Where like Star Wars, like they had the suspension of disbelief. You don't need to you don't need to establish new rules. Like it's the rules are good, so.
Right.
Yeah. And world building is just so fun, like with horror as well, because, you have Jason, and when you think of Jason, you think of Camp Crystal Lake. And when you think of, Nightmare on Elm Street, you think of Freddy Krueger, where these like places and these like the Freddy Krueger house, these are iconic places that are a big part of the story just as much as the killer,
Right.
And pretty much you have, like you were saying, you had the guidelines. Most of the Freddy movies, they came up to that point where you always had the final girl that would come along and pretty much kick his ass while everybody else was dying. So, you had to have guidelines and you had to follow up with it. And me personally, one of like even taking things out of like taking aliens, like I can't think of an alien being in a big city. Most of the time I think of alien comics or alien movies, it's going to be either in space or in like country area where you have a lot of crops and stuff like that, unless you're trying to do a world, a big, take over the world thing. But if you want to just keep these aliens, hush in a small area, it's always going to be in a farmland.
Yeah. So that's totally true.
So go ahead.
Oh, I just think about that. It's like Nosferatu or like Dracula too, right? It has like kind of its own world. If it's gonna be a city, it's usually like a small town. It's it's got like a mystique to it, and again, you're right, like the environments themselves like become kind of part of the character.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like Frankenstein's
Even
castle.
Yeah, for sure.
hmm
I love it.
Like I can't imagine like if they were like, oh, we brought the monster back in a apartment building. No, I mean you need to you got to establish these places. You know what I'm saying?
I kind of want to do that comic, Ronnie. Frankenstein's apartment.
Right. So
That's
like,
great.
besides Evil Dead, what great horror movie do you come to mind where they establish a really great world building to you?
Well, so Nosferatu was definitely one. Like the black and white, like the silent movie.
Yeah.
That's actually one of my all-time favorite horror movies. I think it's like it's shocking because it's a silent movie, and a lot of people I think a lot of people haven't sat through the whole thing, and I think if they do, they'll be slightly horrified. Like it's still to this day like there's something about the character design, and again, like the world building involved in it, all the side characters, but the fact that the whole thing, I think because it was filmed in black and white,
the
whole thing is kind of misty and vague. And it's of course in like Transylvania, but it's like the city area is so small, and like there's like cavernous kind of scenarios, but most of it's like very bleak kind of world with just a real focus on like on atmosphere and the environment of the character. And to me, that's one that like really just like the environment totally makes that a great movie. Yeah. I don't know.
That was an unexpected answer, but I'm curious to check it out now.
Oh, it's so good. It's
really
so good. Like my wife and I just got it on a lark a couple years back. And we were sitting and watching it. We were like, I'm actually kind of freaked out. Like we were kind of surprised, because it's just like you don't think it's going to be like, a lot of those old Universal monsters, which are great movies, but a lot of those don't have like actual suspense to them. Like they're just kind of,
they're what fun. They are, right?
Yeah, they're fun, but they're not like, but this one we actually watched and we're like, whoa, I actually like, there were a few moments where I felt like chills, because it's like, it's also just the way they designed the vampire is so just utterly frightening. It's very strange, but I love that. Yeah, sorry, that's a weird one.
No, that's awesome.
What about you, Jason?
Geez. I love Thriller, like the long extended version of Thriller.
Yes.
Yeah.
That goes from the rules of the world are set up in the movie that they transition to in real life.
Yeah.
But the real plot twist that you forgot about is Michael Jackson is actually this wildcat werewolf the whole time.
Dude.
But the world is set up like it's multi-dimensional in this super subtle 80s way. Like it always includes a dance solo. But it's just they go through the screen with Michael Jackson's lyrics, and it's one of like the perfect art creations like of my lifetime for sure. Like it's like one of the 8 wonders of the world, because it was also the horror that snuck through, because my dad would rent a VHS every single Friday when he got paid, and he put his $100 deposit down, and he would get a movie, but he would also either get Thriller or 25th Anniversary of Motown, and that was like the 2 dependables. We watched those all the time. So, but Thriller was my first like deep horror exposure, because it's kind of twisted.
Yeah.
But it's all set up by the rules of the world. And the rules of the world are things that you see and you hear, but you don't think about. And it's like, that's the art of world building in horror, but in music and from Michael Jackson. It's just, it's a pretty cool link in the chain. It really is.
Plus Vincent Price. I mean, like,
Oh, man.
like
All bases are
best.
covered. You know,
so good.
Yeah,
But I love that
Voice
monologue
alone.
so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had the whole thing memorized for so long, but it was just it's the best. I may or may not have it memorized now, but I'm definitely not performing Michael Jackson.
No, but before I get into the movie series that I really like, you know, the great thing about horror, world building and horror is like, okay, you have to have like the origin of the killer, and it's usually connected to some type of certain place, and then you have like the stereotype teenagers, you have the jock, you have the final girl, just all these characters within it, and you usually have to have like some type of weapon that you have to kill them with. You know, sometimes it has to be supernatural, sometimes it's not. You know, it's trying to take like the same typical story but make a little twist on it, because there's no original story out there. You know, you have to make your own style. But the series that I really like, not as much as the third one, but I love the Poltergeist movies, you know, especially 1 and 2. One is like outstanding, but 2 alone, what I liked about 2 is that you actually got to find out, like, you know, their house was buried on a cave entrance where this priest wanted to take these people to the afterlife and just held them there prisoner. So you actually got to see like more character development on what was holding her there in place. And man, the guy was just creepy too. Like as a kid, I couldn't look at the box of like the oatmeal box because it was him just as a fat guy. You know,
oh my God.
God is in his holy temple, you know. And then just as a kid, seeing like the father down in the tequila, and you see like that giant worm being thrown up out of his mouth, just great special effects.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, 3 wasn't my favorite out of the bunch, but 1 and 2, I just like how it continued and explained more what was going on and what was buried under that house.
Yeah. Dude. Poltergeist 1, I'm so glad you brought that one up, because it's like that's one of my favorites too. And the interesting thing is, like, I think that movie's the reason they made like the PG-13 thing, right? Because I think it came out and it was originally just PG. But what I like about it is, like, on a visceral level, it's not like full of a bunch of like gore. Like that whole story is hinging on that world that they build. The rules, the house, like they have like one of my favorite things about that movie is at the beginning, like very subtly, they kind of get you really familiar with the house they're in. And so they have a lot of sequences where you're seeing all the different staging areas where where crap's going to go down. And and they kind of prep you and get you ready for this like just insane story where most of it is just really subtle, weird things happening that aren't even really like dangerous. It's just like chairs moving. And again, like, you know, I think that might've been the first movie to just do like, it's just creepy to have a little kid, you know, staring at a fuzzy screen. I mean, that's just like, that is just creepy. But yeah, that the world they build, they established the relationships of family very early on in that first one. Yeah, that is masterfully done. That's a really good one.
So I guess what I more specifically about world building, what I like short. I like more compact world building. I like it I like to, especially with horror, I like to build on top of one spot just to make it heavier and heavier. Versus, you know, I appreciate reading like a lot of like the lore of these of like some of these horror legacies, but I appreciate things like the first Saw. Like in the world of the first Saw it's an anthology story, but it's all told in one bathroom. And even your big bad is in the bathroom the entire time. And the fact is, like, he holds the truth of everything in that one spot, but they become obsessed with staying alive to the point they'll do anything. And it's like it's almost like a confessional like everybody deserved almost to be where they were. And now that you've established like these rules, like, okay, maybe not everybody is great. Now, like, what happens next? Like, is this where who decides who pays for what? And it's more of a psychological world building that I appreciate. Like, I like to see what happens where versus why something is happening. Like,
yeah, that's a really good point. I think like just thinking about it too, structurally, I think it makes for a much stronger horror to actually have a simpler concept and premise. And I like that, Jason, that you were talking about it being kind of short, because like even like, so I really enjoyed Clive Barker's like Hellraiser too, right? And the first Hellraiser is so great, and then they just perpetually kind of lose lose quality, and it's not that they were losing quality for any other reason than the story. They just start actually getting more into like, who are these Cenobite creatures, and you start finding out more. And I like, there's part of me that like loves that, but I think the strength of that first film is like, you don't really know who the Cenobites are. Like, you don't really know what this like contraption is that, you know, is unleashing this kind of curse, right? You just get little hints of it. And I agree too with the idea of it being kind of in a condensed location. I mean, like Psycho by Hitchcock, it works because it's in a hotel, and it's like it stays in that hotel. I think like, it's hard. It would be hard to pull off horror. I'm trying to think of horror that you could pull off on like a broad scale that's not in like a shed or a room or a house. Like, you know, I don't know. That's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, it's just like Psycho is the best. I have to say this since you said it. So Ronnie, blame Josh. But in real life, if Norman's mom was in that hotel, there's nowhere for her to go with as much as she hates this lady that's flirting with her son. But in reality, she hates this woman because she's everywhere that Norman is. You can't imagine the tension in that moment. Like, it has to go somewhere. And it goes so left so fast that you forget that she stole a bunch of money to get where she was. Like, it's just like the fumbling of a bad decision. There's so many levels to Hitchcock. Okay, that's all I got. I'm done. I'll stop now. I'm not done, but I'll stop.
I love that though, and I'm glad you brought up the misdirect at the beginning, because I think that's really important too on like a world building. It's an effective way to do horror where it's like you can like, I think it's great to, especially if it's a story where like From Dusk Till Dawn actually is like a way less like solidly structured but still fun movie. But it's got a similar premise where it's got this total side plot that has very little to do with like all the craziness that's going to ensue later. And it starts on the car drive, much like Psycho, right? Where it's like you're introduced to this totally different drama that in like, by the time the real plot comes in, none of that is going like, it's a total misdirect to get your mind thinking like, oh, how are they going to solve this conflict? How are they going to solve this issue? And I think that's a really good tool when you're structuring like a horror story too, is the idea of like possibly using that misdirect of like the whole narrative of her stealing the money, right? And it's like that gets your mind going, and you're already thinking about a different conflict. So you're like, how much
background to that? Like, that was what the movie was about. In your mind.
And you're like, okay, well, that's the conflict they're going to resolve, because we all know the hero's journey, right? So it's like, we're introduced to the conflict. Like, eventually, it's just going to start ramping up, and no, it's like that was a total false flag. I love that. When it's intentional. Sometimes it can just feel like
wait a minute, what happened here?
Right. And that goes into like, you know, of course, we'll bring it up. how when Texas Chainsaw Massacre first came out, they're like, oh, this is based off of a true story. I think when you pump people up to like get that in their head, like this is based off of a true story, people are eager more to watch something like that because they want to see how crazy someone could really be, because people are into that stuff. I mean, people wouldn't sit down and watch what really makes a serial killer tick.
Yeah. No, that's totally true. It's that's very true. Like the psychology of it can be interesting too in that sense. Like
100%. Yep.
I'm trying to Zodiac, right? Like the full movie, the Fincher one. It's like a 3.5 hour movie, and I know people who like couldn't stand it because they were just like it's just too long. I found it fascinating because it was just attempting so much to like really document like what happened. And I think it's intriguing on the level of like almost like a documentary. But there's also the all those haunted movies that come from that. I forget that crazy couple that like sort of went around the country saying like,
The Conjuring,
So but there's a whole series, like a whole bunch of and like it's been exposed like much later on, like they were kind of hucksters that just went from town to town and were like, we're gonna cure your house of ghosts,
right?
but the fact that they were a real couple, I think does make for this like lore that makes it really intriguing. I think that's kind of, I don't know, I think if I were marketing a horror, I might try to go that route. Little do you know, like Two Stories is actually just second volume's just going to be a pure horror. Marketed as a true story.
Me and Ronnie were talking, and before we came on, there's so much of your story that has it. The tension it's tight, and it's like that's what you look for in a horror title. But it delivers like it's so raw at times. Like it's uncomfortable to read, but you can't take your eyes off of it. And hold on, I gotta show it. Like I love the size of the book. Like this is like HD. Like this is like widescreen comics. I love it. And the read is like so engrossing. It's just fun to sit and read because I read it by accident the first time. I intended to flip through it, and I read the whole thing in one bite. So
that's so awesome.
It's such a good book. But no,
I read through it the first time, then the second time I just went through the pages and looked at the artwork.
Nice.
It's just really detailed,
all
really
the way
great
across the board.
I love like you went from like the realistic then to like the cartoonish in different panels. So I just really love that whole take on it.
Very thoughtful book. Like it's we have a lot to talk about one day. Man. I love your book, man. It's so good.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you brought up the tension thing though, because that is something I consider a lot. Actually, for the second book, there's a sequence that goes through a scenario in my own life where I was jumped in downtown Long Beach in like a really bad neighborhood, and it was a pretty horrific thing. Sure. And the way that I structure the first book, there's a lot of like tension and then tension alleviation. And that's something that like Hitchcock did really well. Shakespeare, like back in the day, used to do that. Like when Hamlet gets really dark, like they switch to like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern being jackasses or something, just to like give people a break for a second, because you can't hit people too much. But there's a part in the second book where I intentionally pull back the easing. So it's just, and I intentionally like switch the panel arrangement where it's just almost like 9 panel grids for like 20 pages. And it's just brutal, like nonstop, just like there is no alleviation. It's just because the tension is just intentionally like it's an overload.
That's how it is. That's how it is sometimes. Like that's, if you can feel it, you know it. Yeah.
And so, but it is funny because it's like, I think that I'm glad you guys like see that too, but it's like I definitely see that like with good writing, whether it's horror or whatever, it's like that's definitely something that authors, like, I think we all consider is like, like, what is my reader going through? What do I want them to experience here? And as a horror writer in particular, like, that's so fundamental, because, and I've seen horror movies that totally don't consider that too. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I definitely have seen ones where it's like, it's like the meaning or intention is kind of lost. And so it kind of loses the audience, because the audience is supposed to be feeling tense at this point, but they didn't do the work to kind of get you there. Or it's just like too much tension, and like they didn't think about like alleviation or like switching scenes or something like that. And it's interesting. Jason, I've also noticed on these, you've mentioned Blair Witch Project a bunch, which I think people give flack now, but I don't think a lot of people realize like how innovative that was when it came out.
Especially the first movie. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And exactly what Ronnie was talking about is like perfect in that movie, where it's like, they sort of marketed it as a true film. And then it was released and it really felt like a documentary, and the camera itself becomes a part of the world, right? Like just the way the camera is handheld becomes like the main source of tension in that movie is just the camera work.
100%. There's
my mind was blown seeing that movie.
I've said, I know that it's not the scariest movie ever, but it's the scariest movie that I've seen. Like, it was just, it played off the things that drove me scared personally. And so it's like, if I could get 225,000 of me to have to feel that feeling, I've done it. Mission accomplished. Like, because the rest of them can put it back down. Like, we're good.
Yeah, because it wasn't about just typical jump scares. It was actually about a movie trying to play with your emotions. Yeah, and that's what's truly terrifying about it. Sure, like the other movies they came out with were going a little bit too cheesy with like showing like monsters and stuff. But the first one definitely was, groundbreaking.
Yeah, and mapping the unseen and that tension, and then also just playing off of like all of, like most people have a psychological thing where association with just camping in the woods, because like every kid had some point in a tent with another kid where you like put you put like the flashlight under, and like you all freak each other out. You're like, there's monsters. Oh no. And that fear, it's like embedded in us. Like, so there's like, I think there's like a subconscious thing that they really played at in that first film. I agree that sequels, I wouldn't even really think of, too much. Yeah. But it's like that, but that first one was like just so played on that very well too, where it gave you that feeling of like the kind of like you're lured in, you can't look away because it's got the campfire story vibe.
But there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then there's nowhere to go because nobody knows where the map is. And then it's like, oh, he kicked the map in the stream and they're just going in a circle. The map was pointless, but it was that last little beacon of hope. Yeah. And then the stones get kicked over. And then it's like, so this is not a typical world building story. I understand it, but I feel like with horror, the things that anything can be your world. But it's just a matter of keeping tension in it, because that's the raw natural. Everybody gets tension. Not everybody may not feel that anxiety, but everybody knows what tension feels like. So in your world building, like that's the tool. Like you gotta constantly like, where do you put the tension and where do you make sure it can't fall back out? Because sometimes they just kind of fizzle out before you get the real finish. So
and then you start seeing like all these horror slashers having movies where they take place in space. I'm like, I don't need to see, Dracula in space. I mean, it's a real movie, but it's just crazy. Like they just go so extreme. Like even with Leprechaun in space, like just stick to the premise, We you don't have to have, oh, this leprechaun was in space and yada yada yada. No, we don't need that.
Dude,
But
okay, the space thing though reminds me of I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Moon. It's like Sam Hyde.
wasn't that
I think
the one
it's-
where like the rocket flew into the moon's eye?
No, it's this like, so this guy is literally just stranded on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of stuck in like a lunar base, and sort of like his mind is playing tricks on him and stuff. And he ends up having this little mission on the moon, and it kind of goes from there. But for world building and tension, it's more of like a suspense, but it's very, very well executed. And I don't think it was actually Sam Hyde. I'm sorry. But Sam Rockwell, Sam Rockwell's
Gotcha.
in it. It's really good, but it's like, it again, it's just like, it's more like you're just stuck and isolated in this creepy environment that's hostile to life. And again, like, that's a movie that's like driven by the world. It's in space, but the reason it's in space is like thought out, you know?
That's
like,
awesome.
I mean, that's why Alien's so great, right? Like, I mean, it's like, there's a reason it's in space. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. How much pressure can you pack in a tuna can?
Yeah.
But imagine if you drop a giant space worm with arms and legs and a little mouth inside the tuna can.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. But that's your world. Like, because we've seen it hit and miss. I think we talked about that with Gary recently. Like, you've seen the Alien movie in space miss, but you've also seen the superior version of that in the same world.
Yeah.
With Alien in particular. It's world building is kind of different in horror because it can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. I also love that, like, you mentioned, like, on the Blair Witch or whatever, it's like the map as a device, like, that's part of the world building, because what you do when you like present like a map, right, in a story is like, there's an expectation that the map is going to lead somewhere, right? And you're introducing that expectation to the viewer. And so, and part of, like, for me at least, part of tension and suspense and like building that is you set an expectation, and then you get people to like be eager for that expectation. So it's like, you're like, you're kind of, it's almost like you're giving a formula where you're like 1 + 1 equals, and people are just waiting for that too. Right. And what you do with that, like, can kind of dictate so much of whether it's horror, whether it's like a romantic comedy, like whatever it is you're writing. Right. It's like what you do with that expectation that you're setting people up is so unique and awesome. And I love that you mentioned the map, because you're right. Like, by that map being made useless, it just it kind of destroys hope at that point.
Right.
And it's like, such, it's such an intentional choice, you know. I love that. So,
you know, it's being in the desert with no water anywhere, but losing your canteen. Like, it doesn't really matter, but now you know. Yeah. Now, even if you found a way out, you've lost. And so, Blair Witch Project gets a bad rep. It was very scary to me. And it was, I don't want to say I don't scare easy, because I might, but it definitely was a good scary movie.
For sure. And Dory, she was talking about The Exorcist, man, especially the first one, what they did with the character design there, not even with like the little girl itself, but like how the mother would be in the kitchen and you just see that face appear out of the darkness, just grinning, just really great stuff there on building, like taking, you know, the devil and just adding, you know, a different take on it, because it's just really great to see, you know, how to go about doing that. And then the whole possession thing with her throwing up, and just the backstory with the priest, just, you know, got to bring it up.
It certainly wasn't not scary.
Yeah, exactly. Another great example of like world building, we got to talk about it because we talked about it in the last one, and we usually do. John Carpenter's The Thing. That's some great world building there.
Oh yeah, and effects actually.
Yes, exactly.
That was effects done right. Like there's not much that I don't have anything to complain about that movie ever. Like it's such a good product. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's oh my gosh. You know what's funny is this also just thinking about world building in the sense of like environments and character backstories and stuff. It's like The Shining.
Oh
like,
yeah.
That whole movie is like I feel like you could study that as an artist for years and start. I mean, just for composition, but also just the atmosphere of that hotel is like it is one of the best created atmospheres. It's like it gives you a time period that like
I've been to that real hotel. It's quite a nice place.
That's it's up in is that in Washington?
No, in the movie there was two different places. So the outside of the hotel and inside is two different places. So I've been to like the one in Colorado where they actually have the haunted room. So yeah.
Oh, sweet. Oh, I want to go. So that's in Colorado. Okay.
Yeah, and ironically, it's the same hotel where they shot Dumb and Dumber, where they walk in with the tuxedos.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Overlook Hotel is pretty much that's an A1 hit as far as your world building, because there was tension in the food cabinet. Like in the beginning of the movie, you could tell you could tell that the little boy knew that it was trouble, that now this other guy knew that he could see things like he could. And it was like they just knew where to put the camera in those rooms. And I don't know. It was just a fantastic little ride, man. Like
yeah.
And if anybody hasn't seen the movie, of course it's not as great as The Shining, but I think it's called Dr. Sleep. It is the sequel to The Shining, and it just goes way out there, like explaining like the Shining and the powers and like all these different things that people could do. It, just watch it and you'll just like, man, was he high when he wrote this? But it's pretty much the other,
funny.
Which the like answer is like 90% probably,
Usually,
Yeah, it's like with Stephen King's books, unlike the movies, you actually see how like some of these characters are actually in other books. Like if people remember the book in the movie, The Tommyknockers, with the aliens, when at the end of the book, the kid is actually driving past like a sewer. And in the book, he actually says that, hey, I seen a clown in the sewer. And also, just a reference there. And also the movie Dreamcaster with the people with the psychic abilities. In part of the book, they go and they actually see I guess one of the characters, he was from Derry. That's where he was born and raised. And he saw a little piece of paper saying Pennywise lives. So it's just interesting that we never got that chance to see, like Stephen King, how he wrote in all these books of how these characters are all part of one big universe and they're just separate right now in the movies. I would love to see if they ever go that route.
Oh, wow. Like just kind of play up all the connections between the stories. That'd be so awesome. I like, man, some of the scariest stuff I've read by Stephen King was like in his short stories, different seasons.
Yeah.
It's like, they're like, and they actually made a movie of this and it was frightening, but it was called Apt Pupil. That's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
It's pretty tense.
It's terrifying.
It is.
Yeah, but it's like I think it's Ian McKellen in that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's just and that's another world building thing too, where it's playing off of history and like horrific things that happen in history, and then kind of just playing up the tension in that. I think I definitely think the King is really good at kind of setting. The other thing I like too is he gives these subtle indications of like character relationships, like at the beginning. Like The Shining like when that starts out, it's like you know the relationship. There's this tension already in the marriage and also with like with his kid, and so it's like there's like already kind of a tension. They're going there to kind of solve this problem. So again, like kind of a side quest, right?
Right.
But just introducing it with that kind of tension, which is tension like people know, like we've all been like at a restaurant where like there's a couple that's angry at each other, like the point being like it's something we're all familiar with and we see in the world. And that's a good entry point, I think, for like world building with it's like the thing in Star Wars where the ships break down, like the ship won't start. Like the second that happens, you really believe it's a spaceship, at least for me, because it's like, oh, well, my car's broken down. I get it. They have the thing they have to bang to like get the ship started, It's like, okay, well, that like we've all been there. I think that's a good entry point in world building too, where it's like you can establish like connections that people can relate to before kind of going into the kind of the more outlandish things, I think that's good.
Yeah.
So I gotta say about Stephen King, reading his descriptions of towns when I was a kid in like growing Gastonia, North Carolina, and then moving to Maine. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I understand why he saw the things that he did, because they're really up here. Like it's like world building in your general vicinity. And it just lends so much more realism to his writing. So it's just a fascinating thing about Stephen King's world building since we were on the subject of Stephen King.
I mean, another great example of like one of his books / into a movie is Misery. Just, oh my gosh. Just the acting in there.
The book was way more intense than the movie.
Oh, yes. Yes, it was. But just, going off of that, you had the crazy fan, then you had the writer who's just having writer's block and can't really think of what to create after his, bestseller. Just, you had to realize Stephen King probably thought about, what would he had to come across if he came across any fans like that. But yeah, for sure.
But Misery, I'm sorry, In the Mouth of Madness is like the fever dream of Misery. It's like this writer who is trapped in a house to write, but this other guy is trying to stop the worst writing ever from being put into existence. It's just it's so good, y'all. Like Stephen King is so I don't know, I love it. I'm very happy that we get to bring up Stephen King, and like especially reading American Vampire right now. Like he was all over that first chapter. So
like really establishes unique environments too, so it's like I think that's kind of key too to what he does, because like it's like he's always very clear on like the kind of the area that they're in, like what are the buildings, what do the buildings look like you kind of giving you a map like in your head of like what the locations are and stuff. So like when things play out on the stage, you like have a complete idea of what the stage is. And then I do like that he doesn't over explain mystery sometimes. Like I'm hesitant to watch a sequel to The Shining because I'm like, I liked kind of the fact that it wasn't really explained too much. It was hinted at, and there were a lot of questions. I almost like would be bummed to find out the answers to those questions,
It's definitely nothing compared to The Shining. It's one of those movies. It's just interesting to watch and see how he took it, but definitely not par with it.
Just a different story.
For sure.
But sorry though, Misery was definitely a horror movie.
Oh yeah.
I just wanted to put that through the chat machine. It's 100% a horror movie. That's all. She cut his foot off in the book. She cut his foot off. Cut it off his body. didn't break it around a stick, which looked crazy visually, but she cut his foot off. So yeah, it's a
that's pretty horror movie.
It's a horror movie.
And talking about Stephen King, let's talk a little bit about one thing that was a great movie and they turned into a comic book, Creepshow. Just great small little movies that even Stephen King, he was in one about the plant. Just, it was great to see like those little mini movies that, wasn't too long, but they had great special effects and a great storyline to it,
But
and Bertie Wrightson, if I'm not mistaken, drew some of those Creepshow books.
Nice.
But it goes back to what Josh was saying earlier about like Stephen King's short stories being so tight. Like and I love that's where his world building like shows up. Like Cat's Eye is another good anthology story. I loved that when I was a kid. And then you have like Creepshow. Like I remember watching the movies at the barbershop or at the laundromat when I was a kid. Like that was like my only access to like good horror was like in places where it happened to be on TV. But just like, man, like that's my kind of horror anyways, is the world building in these short, compact locations. That's what I've enjoyed the most about the minis, is like, and it's easy to write horror in these short locations because you almost want people to go back and read it over or just not know what they read. Like that's the cool place.
Yeah, that's why, you have all these urban legends like, oh, don't go to this place in this state because this place is haunted with like this person that got killed. That stuff really pumps people to like go and explore and do ghost hunting and stuff like that because they want to know more, and that's why on YouTube you see more people.
Some people. I know where to stay away from.
But you see so many people now on YouTube creating their own like ghost hunting videos where they get a group of people, they're traveling around. Before you had them only on Sci-Fi, but now with YouTube you see like so many channels dedicated to that.
Yeah, and I think that's like also it's sort of like, I think the fun of it is the mystery of it makes people want to kind of go solve a mystery. And I think if you can create that sense for people, like like weirdly enough, I know this, I'm sure this should be connected with horror, but it's like when I think of the Twilight Zone, right? Like the original Twilight Zone. It's like those are some of the most awesome writing of any little short stories, and quite a few of them are total horror.
100%.
Now they may not be like slasher gore kind of horror, but they're definitely horror.
They'll scare you. Yep.
I think that like the format that those are written in, when done well, it does lend itself really well to that mystery, that horror, that kind of suspense, the tension. And then, sometimes it also just is like, hey, there's a demon on the plane wing. Like, but my point is like, I do, I have fond memories of like, as a kid, like seeing reruns of that, like around New Year's and just kind of going to sleep and feeling a little creepy, like just a little, it's just like this, like, I don't know why I feel unsettled kind of feeling. I think if you, can touch that with people, I think that's great. Like
it's the target. Like that's the horror target. Like that's definitely in the two smaller rings on the bullseye. You got to hit a lot of them, but this is one you definitely want to hit.
Yeah, I've been it's funny. I've been reading Red Room, which is just it's not written for me. It's written for me when I was in like 7th grade, and I don't mean that as an insult because I love that it exists. So there's this era, like at least for me, and I don't know if you guys had this, but it's like there's an era when I was in junior high where I needed to read just like the most gory, like over the top, like ultra violent stuff. That's when I like started digging into like Tales from the Crypt comics, and like the gorier the better. Part of why I was into Spawn, like in junior high, was like, I mean, there like there's an ice cream man getting ice cream scoops shoved into him. You know, it's there's something just like the ultra violence. It's like you need it as a junior high kid. And I'm not saying that only lasts in junior high. It's just for me that was like a huge selling point on comics or movies. Like when I was a young man, Red Room is like it literally ticks off every box on that list, and I love that it exists. And I also think it does something very clever on the sense of world building that plays on what you were talking about with ghost hunting. It plays off of a common kind of gossip about something people think exists on the internet.
Yeah.
And there's been no evidence like whatsoever of that thing existing on the internet, but there's a million different subsects and websites where people are like, this thing exists. You know, it's like, if you can grab a conspiracy and you can play that up for like a horror, it's so good. And then the art is so good. And again, for world building, it does build a really effective world. It's like, okay, here's the scenario, and then here are the characters that interweave with it. I think it's brilliantly done. I actually really like, I know it's terrible. I will also just say it's like absurdly violent, but I read it and I was really happy about that.
It was what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. Is that crazy?
No, I think that's okay. I think I think that something exists for everybody, and I think that it's okay that it all exists.
Yeah. And like the weird thing is I wouldn't even make a comic like that. But I'm glad there are comics like that. And I would have been wacky into that, like in as a kid, like, and I know it says it's like it's like not for kids, but there's going to be like a 14-year-old kid who's like, I need this, and gets it. And then it's like, this is amazing. And it's like, it's like equivalent to the VHS section where you're like, that movie looks like something I shouldn't be allowed to rent.
So this is the one I'm going.
Like it's that's also an appeal to horror, like for sure. Is like that feeling of like, this is the forbidden, like, and I think that's a fun thing in world building too. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, most definitely.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
All right. I am. Yeah. Oh, we're already over an hour. Jeez,
yes, we are.
I was about to hold you hostage, Josh. We was gonna do this all night. We was going third shift tonight.
I mean, there's been times where we got over like 2 hours.
I love it.
This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah,
it has been. It's been really awesome. I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, we enjoyed it, man.
Right.
Awesome.
You're a guest. We wanted you to talk about yourself and talk about horror because people watch us enough to know what we like about it. So.
I love it. I'm flattered to be on, and I do love horror, and I love that you guys do such a good job like talking about it. And
thank you.
It makes me want to work on a horror book next.
It's fun, man. It's really fun.
Yeah,
I love it.
Well, again, go to the link here. Buy 2 stories. You are missing out. It's only like what, $6 right now? That's a steal.
Yeah, it's insanely low priced. And the cool thing is, I get the same cut from as I would from it selling at full price because it's an Amazon reduction. So, so just so people feel comfortable, go take advantage of it and get it for $6 before it goes back to like $19.99.
Yeah, go get it, guys. It's so good. Yeah. It's so good. Edge to edge, bumper to bumper. It's A1. So go get the book, guys. Go read Ronnie's book on Tapas. Go get my mini comics, minicomicbundles.com.
Yes.
And thank you, everyone in the chats. Frank, Squashy, Dory, we appreciate it. You guys make it so much better too. Just commenting, hanging out in the chat, and just giving what you like about horror and some of your favorite movies. Really great stuff. So we appreciate all of you guys. All right, bye everyone. Peace.
Take care.